Greetings, everyone. We'll get started in a minute or two.
Just on JS.
Hello, everyone. We'll get started in a minute, just letting participants into the session.
Yeah, I've lost everyone.
All right, I think we can get started. We are celebrating Arts and Humanities Month in Rhode Island, and welcome to the Culture Builds the Future virtual panel discussion. And this is our culminating event for Arts and Humanities Month. Just a couple of items. Closed captioning is available for this session, and you can find that at the bottom of your screen. It's the button that says CC live transcript. So you want to have the captioning, you just click on that. This session will be an hour and a half hours long, and it will be recorded, and I think you probably already saw that box pop up. So if you don't want to appear in the recording, please keep your camera off, and that will prevent your being in the recording. But we definitely want you to participate. And please also keep your microphone muted. I would like to start us off with a land acknowledgement. As we celebrate arts, culture, and the humanities here in Rhode Island, we recognize Indigenous Rhode Islanders, including the Narragansett, Niantic, Nipmuc, Wampanoag, and Pokanoket peoples, as traditional stewards and inhabitants of this territory. And we recognize the histories of colonial violence and dispossession against Indigenous communities in Rhode Island. Indigenous people from many nations live, study, and work in Rhode Island today, and we gratefully acknowledge their ongoing contributions to our state. We also recognize that the state of Rhode Island exists in part due to the forced labor of enslaved and indentured people of African descent and Indigenous descent. We acknowledge and honor the integral contributions of these Rhode Islanders to our state, and we value their legacy in Rhode Island's cultural and civic life today. So I'll turn now to just briefly go over the structure of our virtual session. For the first half hour, we will spend some time recognizing Congressman Jim Langevin for his support of the arts, culture, and humanities in Rhode Island. And then following at around 11:30, we will turn to a conversation on how culture builds the future, featuring 4 grantees of the Rhode Island Culture, Humanities, and Arts Recovery Grant Program. that was a historic collaboration between the Humanities Council and the State Arts Council. And that will be facilitated by myself, and I should have introduced myself already. My name is Elizabeth Francis, and I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities. And it also will be facilitated by my wonderful colleague, Lynne McCormack, the Executive Director of the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. And with that, I will turn things over to Lynne.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's really a pleasure to be here this morning with all of you. We're so proud to be hosting this event today in partnership with the Council on the Humanities. As Elizabeth said, we're incredibly grateful for the collaborative relationship that we share with Rich. This is actually a really amazing partnership. Many humanities councils and arts councils across the country work together, but we have a very deep and long history of working together with the CHARG program recently, but even more lengthy relationship with our expansion arts program. So we're just thrilled that we work together and that we are able to share resources and combine efforts to do these kinds of events together. Elizabeth and I want to just take a second to thank our amazing teams. Julia Reynaud, the Associate Director of Grants and Strategic Initiatives, and Rachel Jeffers, the Associate Director of Engagement for Rhode Island Committee for the Humanities. And then I just want to give a big shout out to Todd Trebor, our Program Director for Organizations, and Fade Zuckerman, our Director of Communications and Community Outreach. They've just done a great job working together and putting this event together, and we're truly grateful for their efforts. I also want to just take a moment to recognize our federal and state colleagues that are on with us. I think Ryan Strick is here from Senator Reed's office. A big shout out to my friend Vivian Spencer from Senator Whitehouse's office, who's here today with us. And we're incredibly grateful to Katie Albert from Congressman Langevin's office for all the work that she did and the rest of the team's efforts on putting this event together. Earlier this month, Governor Dan McKee issued a proclamation proclaiming October Arts and Humanities Month in Rhode Island, and we are truly grateful for his support of arts, culture, and the humanities in Rhode Island. One more shout out to Nick Edwards from Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea's office, who's also joining us today. And before we get on with the reason we're here today, I just want to lastly recognize my predecessor, Randy Rosenbaum, who's on the call with us as well, for his stalwart and incredible leadership of RISCA over the last 27 years. They are big shoes to fill. But without further ado, today we are here to honor and celebrate Congressman Jim Langevin for his advocacy, support for arts and humanities, and the role he has played as a cultural ambassador in Congress. During his over 20-year service to Rhode Island, Congressman Langevin has been a true champion of the arts and humanities. We recognize his leadership on legislation in Congress to turn STEM to STEAM, really understanding that art and design are vital tools for problem solving and working with engineers and designers, and that arts is critical to that work. We also want to thank him for his unyielding commitment to carrying the message of economic impact of arts and culture and the important roles that the humanities play in the civic life of the state. Additionally, Congressman Langevin has been an incredible advocate for the power of art therapy in helping to heal the psychological wounds of our war veterans and working with arts and health in general. And that is at the national and local level. And finally, and most importantly, he recognizes that the arts and humanities build communities and create social cohesion. I want to thank him personally for regularly convening the Arts and Culture Roundtable, where he invited arts leaders, artists, humanists to discuss and advise him on how he might serve us in Washington, D.C. I'm going to get teary-eyed now. Congressman Langevin, we are so grateful for your service. And now we just want to share a few words from your delegation colleagues about your work.
Thank you to the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts and the Humanities Council for inviting me to say a few words for my friend and colleague, Jim Langevin. Like today's featured panelist, Representative Langevin has elevated the cultural and civic richness of our state. He has been a leader in supporting funding for the arts and humanities, recognizing their power as an economic engine for our state, as a tool to help heal the pain of those in times of hardship, and as a way to bring our communities closer together. I've been proud to work alongside Jim and our delegation each day to invest in the cultural and economic vitality of our state. Thank you, Jim, for your service, and congratulations on this much-deserved recognition.
Hi, this is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Thank you to the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities and to RISCA, our State Council for the Arts, for recognizing the long contributions of Jim Langevin in the best traditions of Senator Pell, who actually founded the Council on the Humanities. It's been my pleasure to serve with Jim, and I'm glad you're recognizing him for his many contributions.
Good morning. I'm Congressman David Cicilline. Thank you to the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities and the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts for inviting me to participate today. As we mark National Arts and Humanities Month, I want to take a moment to recognize the outstanding work these two organizations do in our state to enrich our culture, broaden our civic and artistic horizons, and foster empathy and mutual understanding. As you all know, my friend and colleague, Congressman Jim Langevin, will be retiring at the end of this year. Jim, thank you for more than a decade of true partnership and collaboration as we advocated together for strong funding for the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Arts, securing essential resources for Rhode Island's civic and artistic organizations. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we worked together to make sure that recovery efforts, such as the American Rescue Plan, provided significant relief to arts and humanities organizations in Rhode Island and across the country. Your commitment to advancing the arts and humanities exemplifies your steadfast and principled leadership throughout your more than 2 decades in Congress. I'll miss our partnership in Washington, but I know you'll never stop fighting for the good of Rhode Island. Congratulations on your retirement, Jim, and thank you for all that you've done for our state and for our country.
Thank you, Congressman Langevin. We would love you to just say a few words now.
Well, thank you so much. I am beyond words. Thank you so much for the recognition and that of the kind words of my colleagues in the delegation. And it's been a real privilege over the years working with Jack and Sheldon and David on behalf of the state of Rhode Island and meeting all of our needs and many challenges we faced together as a state and as a community. But I also, of course, thank you for the humbling words and the kind recognition. I'll just begin by congratulating all of the awardees today, and I just say what a privilege has been to work with both the Council on the Arts and the Council on Humanities over the years. That we've formed unbreakable bonds and friendship over the years, and the collaborative work we've done together to help enhance those communities, strengthen our state, have meant so much to me personally. So I just again I want to just recognize again all the other awardees, the Rhode Island Rhode Island Culture, Humanities and Arts Recovery Grants Program, and the arts do really play such an integral role in our communities, and we recognize that on so many levels. They bring us together in ways that promote creative thinking and self-expression. Participation in the arts has been shown to improve academic achievement for young people, and it is associated with increased engagement in other social and civic activities. The arts also support thousands of jobs across Rhode Island. We recognize that, and represented a sizable portion of our economy. and we'll continue to do that and grow our economy going forward. In fact, in 2020, arts and culture accounted for more than 3% of the Rhode Island's gross domestic product, and the arts are something that all of us in the Ocean State know so well. After all, it was the late great Senator Claiborne Pell, who I consider a personal mentor of mine, as we all know and recognize as the prime sponsor of the legislation that created the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. And I can say that my colleagues and I in the delegation have, taken it so personally to carry on that legacy. The torch has really been passed to each of us to continue to realize his vision. So Rhode Island has an incredibly vibrant art scene, which is one of the aspects of our state that I'm most proud of. And the arts and humanities are really inseparable places in our state's identity. And I'll say that throughout my time in Congress, I've always prioritized arts and humanities funding, as you know, as we've worked together on these issues over the years. In the face of unprecedented challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, I was proud to vote in favor of the American Rescue Plan Act, which included provisions to help support arts and humanities organizations through that difficult time. We're still, of course, dealing with the effects of it. But I will say most recently, I was proud to vote in favor of HR 8294, which includes funding increases for the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities for fiscal year 2023. That legislation is still pending, but I'm optimistic that we will get it passed before the end of the year. And I'm going to continue to fight for the interests of Rhode Island and the arts and cultural community throughout the rest of my time in Congress and beyond. I can promise you that. So with that, just let me stop there and say thank you again to the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts and the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities for organizing this event and the recognition. I'm really touched and humbled by your words and the recognition. So thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Langevin. We know that you'll continue to be an advocate for the arts and humanities in your next chapter, and we look forward to all that you will do going forward and look forward to continuing to work with you. It's now my pleasure on behalf of RISCA and Rhode Island Committee for the Humanities to present you with 2 handmade glass tumblers by local artists, Gather Glass, that commemorate National Humanities Month and your service. And so thank you so much for joining us today. We are just so grateful for all of your service to the arts and humanities. Elizabeth, do you want to just say a little?
Thank you so much. They are beautiful tumblers, and now I'll actually have time to put something in them and
enjoy that.
Thank you for everything, Congressman Langevin. It's really been, a high point to be able to work with you and your amazing team, both in the state and in Washington, and appreciate everything that you've done. And I'll never forget the moment when you gave a powerful speech on the floor of the House advocating for the important role of the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Endowment for the Arts when the cultural agencies were really under threat. And so we really appreciate what you did and your conviction.
That's so nice. Well, we've been in each other's corners, and I'm grateful for that collaboration, the friendship, and what we've done to enhance those communities together. So thank you. It's benefited our state tremendously beyond words.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
To be continued. Thank you.
All right. I think we're going to move into our next part of the program, which is our panel.
Yeah. So we'll now turn to our virtual panel conversation about how culture builds the future. So just a note on why are we having this conversation today? Well, it is the Arts and Humanities Month, and that is been a theme for all of our work in actually starting in September, but through October. And we want to really focus on the role of arts, culture, and the humanities in our communities. We also want to touch on the role of arts, culture, and humanities in the pandemic and how the pandemic has affected all of our work and what we are taking forward into the future to build not just a new normal, but a new better. And I also want to just note that there are some really amazing resources that have been developed by both the Arts Council and the Humanities Council quite recently to support all of our case making and ways of doing our work in arts, culture, and the humanities. And I'm just going to note a couple of them, and there's information about how to access these resources in the chat. So the first one that I want to mention is the Rhode Island Civic Health Index. This was just published in September, and it is the first ever civic health index for the state. It was led by the Humanities Council and our colleague Julia Renaud, and with a host of community partners, academic partners, and government partners. It examines really important areas for community well-being and community participation. And I also think that I'm really proud of this resource because it takes us a step forward in terms of how we understand civic health. It widens and deepens our understanding of civic health to include many ways that people contribute to community. And it also poses questions about what we think about the state of our civic health and also how we can build the future. The index, the Civic Health Index, has a companion that is really specifically about and for arts, culture, and humanities and how they contribute to civic health. It's titled Culture is Key, Strengthening Rhode Island Civic Health Through Cultural Participation. And it has all sorts of ways of talking about the variety of work that cultural organizations do, but how they are united under the umbrella of civic health. And so we hope that it will be something that everyone can use and also come together under that umbrella to be stronger and have a greater impact. As I said, both resources are available digitally, and I think links are in the chat. And if you would like a print copy, we would be happy to send you a copy in the mail or, arrange a way to pick it up. So just let us know. And now I will turn it back to Lynne to talk about another really important resource that has just been launched.
Hi again, everyone. We're really excited this week. Rhode Island State Council on the Arts launched the Rhode Island Arts Education Data Dashboard. It's a collaboration with the Arts Education Project, a data project, which is a national organization and draws on Quadrant Research, the research that Quadrant Research did around the public arts education and charter schools. So actually on Monday, October 31st, there's going to be a webinar hosted by our fabulous Maggie Anderson, our arts program director, and she's going to walk through the arts data dashboard, also with folks from Arts Ed Project, the Arts Ed Data Project, and really give an overview of how that tool is going to work. It's incredible. It shows data from all of our schools, talks about our art standards and which schools how we're doing from a compliance standpoint and reaching our goals for arts education. So I really encourage you to check that out. If you can't get on the webinar on Monday, it will be recorded. But it's a really powerful new tool for art teachers, for parents, for arts advocacy organizations, education advocacy organizations, and we're really excited to be able to provide this tool to the public.
It's really exciting. And so we will now turn to, again, in the chat are ways to access those resources. So, and also you can reach out to Rachel Jeffers for print copies or, but it's all in the chat. So now let us turn to the virtual panel discussion. The participants in the discussion are all people representing organizations who received a grant through the Rhode Island Culture, Humanities, and Arts Recovery Program. CHARG is our forward-thinking acronym for that program. And as I mentioned, it was really a historic collaboration. We were, I think, one of 2 humanities and arts councils in the country to actually come together to distribute American Rescue Plan funds together to have a bigger impact in our state and recognizing the impact of the pandemic was having in our communities. So this was a joint program, and it was supported by federal American Rescue Plan Act funds distributed through the National Endowment for the Arts and the Humanities. The primary purpose of this grant program was to support eligible nonprofits in preparing for, responding to, and recovering from the coronavirus pandemic. And how you all responded to that was really amazing and resilient and creative and innovative. In addition to recognizing how profound an impact the pandemic had on so many cultural organizations. But what this grant program did was to provide a flat grant of $8,000 for general operating support to arts and culture and culturally specific and humanities focused organizations. We made 122 grants, and the priority was given to BIPOC-centered organizations and organizations with annual budgets under $500,000. And as a result of that priority, over 95% of the grants were distributed to these organizations. So that's the CHARG program. And now what I'd like to do is introduce our panelists. So with us today, and thank you all so very much, Allessandra Almeida Soares, who is the Executive Director of the Capeverdean American Community Development in Pawtucket. Gloria Christ, who is President and co-founder the CORE organization in Tiverton, and Clay Martin, Artistic Director, Spectrum Theater Ensemble, located in Providence, and Charles Roberts, the Managing Director of the Rhode Island Slave History Medallions, centered in Newport. So as I mentioned earlier, Lynn and I will facilitate the conversation. We have 3 major questions, and I'm just getting them in front of me right now. And all, and hopefully it'll be conversational, and hopefully we will learn about your perspectives, but why it matters to all of us, and really interested in your insights. So I'm going to start off with the first question, and that is, how does the health and vibrancy of your community inform and impact the work of your organization? And as a kind of corollary, how does the health and vibrancy of your community connect to or motivate the work of your organization? So I will start off by asking Allessandra to share some thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here and really excited about these questions. And to answer the first, I like to say that arts and cultural preservation has always been a part of us, the Capeverdean people, and like other folks of the BIPOC community. We knew this was true, but with the issues and changes around health and COVID, we knew, and we know now, that the arts is what truly kept us alive and well. With the disparities, we got to really see how much of a barrier there was in terms of access, which we thought wouldn't be surprising, but we learned, in fact, it was. Barriers that weren't always spoken about either, because many were cultural. So this was really impactful for how we organized, how we planned, who we target, and what our goal essentially would be, which prior to COVID and all of the issues that happened with COVID would have probably have been different.
Thank you. Does anybody want to chime in? Clay, Charles? Sure. Great.
Well, the truly, what we discovered was that truly vibrant, healthy community is only relevant when it expresses and directs the equity across people across the group, especially those of marginalized in this dominant culture. We discovered when presenting slave history medallion projects that the communities in Rhode Island had objections to a lot of what we were trying to bring forward when you're talking about hidden history. So we've had to help the community by developing a counter-oppressive behavior pattern so that people could see for themselves what it was about themselves that was objecting to the truth about slave history.
Thank you. And I'm going to talk about the Rhode Island community, which Spectrum Theater Ensemble was new to the Rhode Island community when the pandemic started. We had really just formed as a nonprofit. And I can't say enough of how lucky we were that we chose this community to start in, because what we found during the pandemic, especially for a group that's made up of neurodivergent individuals who have disabilities that relate to social interaction, is that there were so many people welcoming us and interested in engaging with us. I feel like we made incredible and exponential strides in the awareness and connection to our community through this pandemic, which I don't think would have happened in other communities. I do think Rhode Island and Providence, especially with the leadership like RISCA and the Council for Humanities have, are exceptions to the rule of how accessible and how connected and interconnected that this arts community is. So we were very lucky.
Gloria.
So I echo what everyone has been saying, and we pivoted in ways that allowed us to really listen and hear what was going on, and that meant we shifted everything to an online format, which then meant we had to get tools available to families. So we created take-home toolkits working with the school districts. So those arts tools could be available throughout. And then we also began to see how the fissures and the fractures within the communities were happening as the pandemic was ongoing. And so we began to work in an arts context with our police department, who were seeing an uptick in children who were caught in the middle of domestic violence situations. So instead of sitting in the back of a cop car, we created community creative arts kits, specifically tactile gifts, individual Play-Doh, individual drawing or painting that could be take home, so that instead of the trauma that's happening, there was a way to sort of rewire, and a child could be engaged in an arts process that was also helping the trauma process become embodied in a way that could be sort of redirected. And we've continued to do that, so that as the uptick continues in trauma-informed, that students that are coming in, as we're back into school, we are listening and hearing that not only do we have to have an arts context, we also have to have a social emotional learning and resources available, because that's now a part of the tapestry of communities.
Thanks, Gloria. I think you almost go right into the next question, which is, what are you carrying forward in the work that you've started during the pandemic, and the ways that you've had to pivot? And Charles, I'll go to you first because you have your hand up, and I think that you started to talk about that a little bit more. I'm really interested in the paradigm shift that you're thinking about with getting people engaged in the medallion work, and how you're having to help change hearts and minds to become involved. So if you could dig into that a little more and maybe incorporate that question in, it'd be great.
Thank you for that. Fortunately, we attacked or approached the pandemic issue by having all of our events outside, because this was originally started as a public arts program. The medallions were created as a way to engage the community in involving the community with their history on a public arts level. We weren't even really thinking, first of all, of history. We were just trying to make that statement so that would be an image out there that people could see, that they could relate to, BIPOC people could relate to in their community. And I want to say what happened with the shift was that first of all, so we did all of our events outside. And in the beginning, like at Bowen's Wharf, they were smaller. And then at Smith Castle, they got bigger. And we learned how to separate the audience so that they could enjoy the event on a large scale, because we got 100 people. And just continued with that kind of process, how we seated the audience in a semicircle, and how we engaged them, so that we were constantly making sure they were aware of our community, which is a tapestry of Indigenous, African, and people and immigrants, people of color. I say people of color because I'm not trying to teach or talk about Black history. I'm trying to talk about American history. And American history is the history of an inclusive history of all of the cultures and the communities in our state. And so that all of us here, even those that might think of themselves as white, are people of color, as we all came here from someplace else. So during the pandemic, we were able to continue our project, so that now we're up to Trinity Church. We have 12 from 2019. We've installed 12 medallions in 12 cities across the state. And we were fortunate to be able to rely on the public, because this is about public engagement.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Charles.
Mm-hmm.
Clay or Allessandra, you want to jump in and share your stories about how the pandemic has changed the trajectory? Clay, go ahead. I see you unmuting.
Absolutely. I think really what we did, and I appreciate so much, I try to always preface this, all the people who created online platformed work and entertainment. That's not where we focused. We took that time again because we were such a young organization to really focus on the idea of development and planning. And so what that created was a shift towards identifying neurodivergent voices and playwrights who we've been cultivating the work of for the last 2 to 3 years, and our accessibility program that I can talk more about later. But like Charles said, shifting to the idea of outdoor performances, again, I don't think this could have happened anywhere else because we had an incredible partner with the Steelyard and Howie Schneider and his team, and had great examples of how to use an outdoor stage from organizations like Trinity Rep and Ryla's partnership with their bilingual Shakespeare productions that were done on the mobile stage. So again, we were just in a very unique and serendipitous position being in Providence, Rhode Island, which allowed us to really focus on development and the future rather than what we were going to adapt to at that moment.
And Clay, can you talk a little bit more about that, like how you adapted and how you're carrying that into the future? What you learned in that process and where you're carrying it forward?
Yeah, we learned that there were so many more neurodivergent voices and people, I think both through the productions that we've been able to do outdoors and the playwriting and new play development program that we created. What that's really become, I think, is seen in our, what we've, I guess, kind of termed our, not mission, but season idea, which is neurodiversity everywhere, that this that neurodivergent individuals exist in so many different identities and forms, but also in so many locations that doing it at one theater in one neighborhood in Providence isn't going to reach the community that we seek, especially since a lot of people who are neurodivergent lack private transportation. So bringing stuff to them, and again, this has only been done through generous support from tons of different organizations. So I think that's also a thing, is as we meet these organizations, we start to understand that there's neurodivergence and neurodiversity in their organizations as well, and thus an understanding for what we're trying to do.
Great, thanks. Allessandra, how has the work that you did during the pandemic changed how you're thinking about the future of the organization and the relationship with community?
Yeah, it's definitely changed our work a great deal. I mean, our mission is to connect, enrich, and advance. And you think that's easy with the pandemic. Sure, you change everything to the online platform. But it's not that simple, especially when you're addressing these cultural barriers that, again, aren't really spoken of. So you have the language aspect, which is very difficult, especially with the Capeverdean community, where you're not able to find the Capeverdean language translated anywhere. There's the assumption that many speak Portuguese, and the reality is that many don't. So we had to think about that aspect. We had to think about the aspect of undocumented folks. There's a large amount of Capeverdeans still coming from Cape Verde. And they're scared to come out to the community. They're scared to come out to different centers and access resources because of their status. So how do we address that? Then we have to think about, how do we address getting families to come to our centers and the barriers around that when families are really focused on surviving, going to work. They might not have the benefits to take time off if they're sick. So how do we address these different things? And so we really, as I said before, really had to rethink, how do we organize and plan these events that make it accessible to them? Do we have someone on hand who is offering translation? Are we offering transportation? Are we really working with families to understand what are the main issues, and also helping them understand that access to arts, access to humanities, like our program, the theater class that we did with the Rhode Island CHARG grant, is important. And it's important, and there is a way. So that was one of the biggest things. And we've taken that aspect now for all of our programming. We're thinking about the health aspect. We're thinking about the many barriers that were brought up with COVID, especially now going forward with everything that we plan and we do. And we've seen lots of improvements. There's still many improvements to be made, but we were happy to see that some of them have happened in our state as well. When you think about initiatives like Beat COVID, lots of Capeverdean leaders in the community step up, and we're really making a stand for change in language, identifying that there are other cultures and communities in Rhode Island who don't just speak Spanish, who don't just speak Portuguese, and many of the other common languages. And how do we reach them?
Gloria, I just want to give you an opportunity to add anything. I know you did talk about some of the work changing as throughout the pandemic, but you want to just add?
Thanks, Lynn. Yes, we took it outside. We began a partnership with PTOs and principals, and we ran a project called Reimagine the Blacktop, knowing that so many students would be outside instead of just asphalt. We gave each school an opportunity to reimagine what a playground looked like, whether it was painting a giant hopscotch or a giant rainbow or a reading nook or a friendship bench, or creating a welcome center as students were coming in. What became really, really clear was that school became a secondary home, and the needs that schools were providing were a layered social services, and as an arts organization, we came in and said, okay, so how do we help? How do we build this community? Because each school is its own little cultural community, and it became focused on the human part of humanities. So schools could have agency and children could have agency over what matters to them. And then we began to see how that extends to owning a narrative and growing a narrative, especially in high school. And one thing that we started to do is our focus was really on middle school, because that's where we were seeing a lot of behavioral 4 to 9, in a wider, large margin. But after running summer programs, it was evident that K2 was really struggling with the impact of the pandemic in a social deficit and learning deficit, and just how to be a kindergartner with the developmental levels. And so now we are working a music and movement program with K1 in Middletown, specifically with MCOSI, which are child opportunity zones, which are after school programs, but also look at the wider community and wider humanities, specifically so that, we access, release, transform, and the art. So if kids can access what's going on, they can release it in music or spoken word or tactile visual arts. And then there is a transformative process that happens.
Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you. And Clay, I see you have your hand up, and then we're going to move on to the next, I think the next question, but go ahead, Clay.
Right. I did want to mention this one because it applies to the trajectory changing because of the pandemic. I was recently at a conference for theater leaders around the country, and one thing that came out of it that we all kind of realized is that we went into the pandemic thinking that it was going to be a pause or a delay in our plans for growth and change, and we came out of it feeling like we were 5 years advanced into the future where we thought we would be, because it gave us the time to connect with so many other people, like-minded people who were dedicated to EDI and accessibility, to really think through what the macro problems were in our industry and what systemic change actually looked like. I think it's also what we're all afraid about as our itineraries get busy again, and to resist the urge to go back to what we used to do, or just fall back into a pattern and keep that momentum going, because it was so transformational.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's great. I think that, like what you just said, Clay, is like, how do we harness all of this change and put it to work into the future and continue to keep those connections, those new connections that were made, those surprising ones, those ones we didn't expect. You've all sort of given examples of that. And so how do we not go back to the before times, I guess, and take advantage of all these wonderful innovations that happened that actually got people connected in ways that maybe wouldn't even have been imagined. So I'm gonna toss it back over to Elizabeth, and she's gonna kind of bring us through the next series of questions.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you everyone for these really astute and interesting perspectives. I am learning a lot. I just want to say thank you to all of you and all of the CHARG grantees for turning in your reports. And we take the reports super seriously, and they're very important to our work. And I spent part of last weekend, and other members of the staff as well, reading the reports, and which included statements of how the pandemic had affected the work and what you were doing. And that message that Lynn just kind of underscored about collaboration and working together across lots of different missions and ways of thinking about arts, culture, and humanities was so present. It was almost in every single report, that sense of connection and collaboration. And it was very powerful. So I will turn to the third question, which is, how do you think arts, culture, and the humanities build the future? And I'll start off with Gloria.
Thank you. And thank you for those words. The CHARG grant spoke to me personally because of the work that I do with arts and humanities, because I think it's so woven together that you can't ignore it. And as an organization, it allowed us to really address the before times and carry that through to the changing times. So I found this quote the other day when I was preparing for this, and it says, "Life is profound if you're awake to see it. It's one thing to draw from culture. It's another thing to be drawn so deeply into culture that your true nature disappears."
Come on.
And I think it is evident that the the CHARG grant established what needs to happen going forward, that arts and humanities and the cultural piece is not going away. It's just something to build upon, because what we have discovered is the arts now are serving a greater purpose. And everyone here knows exactly how profound the arts are in the state of Rhode Island, but also in our communities and the communities that we serve. But now there's a piece of this puzzle because of the impact of COVID and the ongoing pandemic, which is this cultural and humanities piece and the mental wellness piece and the cultural crisis piece, and how the arts look at this and weave it in a way so that someone who may not have stepped deeply in another culture will be introduced through arts and humanity to step into another culture and experience that profound shift. I think as a state, I think as arts educators, arts advocacy leaders, we have to look at all three pieces of this arts puzzle, because it's addressing so many options of where people are now here. And whether it's through theater, because it is not going back. So now all of our theater has a social emotional learning piece. We hire an additional staff member, or we work with guidance, or we work with a district psychologist, so that language and self-care pieces are woven into the theater piece, because we know that through art making, emotions shift, access, release, transform. We know through theater making, different culturals and different writing and different language comes into play. And so everything that we do as an organization now is of a collaborative nature. How can we help your school? We partner with Newport County Prevention Coalition to start a film initiative at the high school, because we recognize that adolescents and young adults have something to say. And it's their narrative. It's not our narrative, it's their narrative. And it turned into a deeply profound shift where parents were stepping up and saying, oh, wow, I didn't realize this. We are working with police departments, we're working with psychologists, we're working with STEM out of Roger Williams and their STEAM certification program. So that our goal of reaching each and every kid who needs to access, something that's going on emotionally, whether it's, body, mind, spirit, we're going to be able to provide that for the humanity and for the development of culture in the community. Thank you so much. It's really meant a great deal to us as an organization.
And what you do means so much to us as well. So it really is an ecosystem. Who else would like to imagine this? Yes, Allessandra.
Yeah, I just feel so kind of empowered from what Gloria said. And my answer is basically that art is a depiction of the past and also a depiction of the present, which we know obviously will impact the future. So planning how we structure arts, culture, and humanitarian efforts is important, because we essentially will mold the future and what it could look like. But really speaking to what Gloria was saying, the biggest thing for our community, I'm speaking generally for the Capeverdean, is acknowledging that arts and humanitarian efforts can be a segue to professionalism. And I say this because it's a big stigma in our community where families and adolescents feel like STEM is the only way.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'll speak briefly about our program, the theater class that we offered was a combination of arts and humanitarian efforts, in terms of we connected with the elderly who shared stories, childhood stories and historical stories of the Capeverdean past. And we had adolescents act them out. And it was really interesting at the end to learn that these children didn't know that these were true stories, and they felt so empowered. They were connecting with their history, which is something that's important for the Capeverdean community, where a lot of that history and culture is being lost in adaptation to the Western culture. And so them also learning and also feeling like, hey, this is something I like, this is something I enjoy, and how can I make this a real future professionally? Can I go to school and pursue this further, and how? We had adolescents actually asking those questions and truly inspired and motivated. So that was very great for us and big for Rhode Island, I feel.
Oh, that was great.
Charles.
Well, we've discovered that the arts, cultures, and humanities can be a vital carrier of the marginalized voices, and they create a new and effective possibilities for shaping community and cultures in a non-violent way. I mean, our events are for families. So it gets an opportunity for parents and grandparents to come together to experience the cultures of people that they wouldn't normally experience. We have a lot of times we have African dancers and singers, and they get a chance to perform with drumming circles, so that the young people experience their history. We have reenactors with muskets, and I'm a reenactor myself for the Black Regiment. And people come up to me when I'm in uniform and they want to know about why and how a musket works and what it would be like to be a Black soldier in the Revolutionary War. And it's so important that for people to experience living history. And that's what we try to provide with our presentations and our medallion ceremonies. And each one is unique according to its environment. So the location itself, the community itself, helps us to create what it is that they need to see and hear for their community so that they can embrace their history through their arts and culture and the humanities. And we think the CHARG grant was a really big help for us to step outside into the community and make sure that we were able to provide those services. We learned so much. Just the idea of talking about a Black regiment, people wanted to know what that was. Well, we're telling them, well, they fought in the first battle, the Battle of Rhode Island. The first battle was fought with Black and Indigenous and white farm boys who contributed to our efforts to become a new nation. And people don't know that. They haven't realized that they contributed in who they are in it. So we've been able to provide that service, and then other things came from it. For instance, the whole idea of oppressive behavior patterns. We were shocked to know that people were timid, like the young lady from the Portuguese descent. I mean, I've had to explain a number of times that there were Spanish, Latin, and Spanish contributors to the Revolutionary War. And because when they're written down in history books, they say they're Black. I have one soldier who fought at the Battle of Rhode Island who constantly had to tell them, no, I'm not, I'm Portuguese. So much so he escaped, joined a gunnery force, and fought against the British. This is how passionate he was about his community, his nation, and his culture. And these stories wouldn't be able to be told or come forward without an opportunity that you guys helped us provide.
I think I love the stories that you're telling, Charles, and and I think there's so many of us that don't know, that just don't know. And that's one of the things that the index talks about is Rhode Islanders' understanding of history. And, there's a big gap across generations and across people of different backgrounds in terms of that. So I will just, I also, just really appreciate how you're talking about history as not just being the past and something stable and something over, that it's something that is very much a part of what we need to learn and interpret and bring into the future that we actually want to build. So so thank you. Clay, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. And I want to just kind of thank the other panelists who said so many things that I would have said before. What I will say is, as to what the arts, culture, and humanities can do to build towards the future, and what STE is really focused on, like so many arts organizations around the country, I think during the pandemic, we realized that the inclusion and accessibility and things that we wanted in the arts, we actually had the expertise to really consult with and provide, because we had the lived experiences. And during the pandemic, we had the time to think about the world we wanted. With STE, that's our, you can see it behind me, neurodiverse, inclusive certified entertainment. where we now work with institutions to make the entire institution accessible to neurodivergent artists, audience members, things like that, is that not just to, we've been identifying the problems, and that was so important to do. I think we had gotten to that place right before the pandemic, and realizing that we can be the solution or advocate for the solution, and that can actually be a part of our business model. I think is really, really important and really, really inspiring, because this is in no way unique what SGE is doing. Their theaters, performing arts institutions, individual artists who are doing this and creating these consulting and advocacy and accessibility programs all over the country. So again, it's ironically maybe that it took a global pandemic, but it's a really exciting time to be in this industry, in this world.
I'm so inspired by hearing all of you speak, because it is so clear that it's heart-centered work, and we all know it's not easy work. And I'm very appreciative to hear what you have to say, but I circled something that Congressman Langevin said, and he spoke how the arts and humanities help us with wounds. And I think moving forward, something that arts, humanities, history, cultural will be addressing in various levels, with various counterparts, are wounded humans who will need access to really think about how they feel and ask the questions about how to move forward and how to not be in the before time anymore, but to be present in an art making, theater making, history making, culturally rich making time period. So when we are able to look at where we are now in the capacity of working in wound care, right? The perspective changes a little bit, because we begin to understand how deeply sensitive all of us are in this after time, and that how through arts and humanities and cultural building, we are able to repair wounds. And that is profound in the sense of what we're able to do with this template, So once again, I know it's exhausting, but I am very appreciative of the work that each of you, all of the little blocks, because obviously you're here for a reason too. It is not work for the faint of heart. It's work for the heart-centered people. So thank you.
I feel like destined or bound to do this work of counter oppression and racial healing, because this is a job that I'm carrying on through my ancestors. I've been to Africa and back, and my family's been involved in the community building all my life. So at this time in my life, I feel it is a mission to be able to bring about a new time for our children and our children's children with racial healing and counter-oppressive behaviors as an example, not just something you read in the book, but something that is living. And I thank everyone here for their artistic contributions to this process.
Does anybody else want to say something at this point? We have a bit of time, so it would be possible to ask the other participants in the session to to chime in, to make comments, to ask a question. And I am looking at the chat, and Maybe Sylvia and Soares asked Charles if there is a place where the documentation of the Portuguese soldier in the American Revolution is. Like, do you know, maybe you and Sylvia Ann can connect around that history and where she can read more about it.
Well, we're still building our online archives. We work with the Daughters of the American Revolution. And as we're continuing to tell stories keep coming to us, I mean, every day. There are people that want to tell the stories about their families, that are descendants of indigenous people, that have been really just about through genocide wiped out. We've had to go to communities and explain to them about their the Nipmuc people that their land is on, so that they can understand that it's not just about them. It's about all of us. And so collecting these stories has been an act of love, and we're developing a grant for our to expand our website, and we're developing programs to do anti-racial healing programs at Roger Williams University, and we're trying to embrace this new concept, which shouldn't be new, especially when you're talking about kids. I have kids that come up to me and say, "That wasn't fair, Mr. Roberts." They're talking about history where people were wiped out, and they look at it like that in a very simple manner. And I have to explain to them, that's true, but now, because of people like you and the information you have, we can change all that. And they go away smiling. That's making change in the heart of our community.
Yeah, I want to just jump in and follow up on the heart word, right? Gloria's used it, Charles, you just used it. In the healing work that everyone's been doing, and the asset-based work that you've been doing. So when we think about problems that face society, problems that face our communities, oftentimes we're coming at it from a what's the problem and how do we fix it, rather than what are the assets we have and how do we amplify them and how do we invest in them and how do we celebrate them and how do we uncover the assets that have been hidden and tell those stories. And so when I hear all of you talking, I'm hearing a lot of that. And as we go forward into the next year ahead of us, I think it compels, the Committee for the Humanities, Rhode Island State Council and the Arts to think more about these, elevating the level of these conversations in our state. And all four of you have been incredibly inspiring today. I just want to thank you for that. You're each just telling incredibly compelling, very detailed stories about things that you've experienced and constituents that you've worked with. And so I think as a collective of humans, all of us on this call, all of our organizations, we all have a role to play in continuing to sort of amplify all this work. And I don't want to end there, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that we caught that. And I'm looking, we don't have a lot of questions coming in the chat. So I don't know, Elizabeth, do you have?
I actually have a question.
Okay, jump in.
Hi, my name is Aganza. So you mentioned something about just the heart. And so I've as an artist, a local artist, I'm really big on giving props to those people who are, we're not waiting for them to die because of an issue that happened, or we're not waiting for something traumatic for somebody to happen to be able to give them their props. And but recognizing those who are doing really great now before they pass. And then also, I feel like art, because art is a form of expression and it's a coping mechanism. And so I think that's not really, I feel like a lot within the education system. I think that's like the root. So it's like targeting the root, which is the education system. So like in the ed school, recently for Hispanic Heritage Month, I went to a few schools and universities and spoke about, because I am Dominican and I am Puerto Rican. So I was talking about, you know, the real roots of you know, colonization and all of that. And some of them, you know, they didn't even have no clue what I was even saying. They were just so used to this book that they've been giving, and they didn't even know what the word Taino was. They thought Taino was Native American, and it's like, no, that's not, it's a different Native, and all of these things. And but I also think it also stems from generational. So like our parents and the parents of our parents, they embed things into us, and then we kind of just bring it along. So I'm kind of glad that this meeting is happening, just because art, you know, especially for me, I feel like art not only within races against each other, but also race within each other, as in like, there's a lot of things that stem within races. So like, you know, having the stigma of if you're Latin, you need to be of dark complexion or whatever the case is, and having that art to be able to use as a form of expression, and even stereotypes of like, what is Latin art? Because I think a lot of people, you know, they think, you know, it's a painted basket of fruits, and I'm like, no, that's not what I paint. So there's so many roots and so many things that art can, that we need to just like, I guess, we can't really speak up, because we've been for so many years in between. Now we're multi races. Now we have multiple races where we're getting to the point where like now people are, well, I have 2% of Black in me. And so it's getting to the point, but it's more of figuring out how do we learn about each other and how do we respect one another through art. I guess that's my say, and figure out the roots so that we be able to express that on art. And so yeah, that's kind of like what I had in mind as to that, because I know that we were talking about all these stems, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you, Gonza.
You know, that's interesting. Years ago, I bought pan pipe flute players from Peru and brought into the school system. And when I was there, I was explaining that they were from South America, that they were Latins. And I had kids, and they come up to me and say, "What country is that?" And I said, "That's Peru. You're Latin people, and this is your culture, and it's special." Then I brought capoeira dancers from Brazil, and I said, "These are people of color from Brazil who are athletes, and this is their culture." And if you've ever seen capoeira dancers, I mean, they leap in the air and can kick you. You know, they were given, Brasilia was given its independence because of the Black and indigenous people from Brazil that were brought there that did capoeira dancing.
Thank
So-
you, Charles. We're gonna, oh, sorry, go ahead, finish your
No,
thought.
no, okay. I just wanted to express the fact that we have the cultures here. We just have to share them.
Thank you. I think we are trying to kind of wrap things up a little bit here. Does anyone on the panel have any final thoughts they want to share with the group before we close out? Clay?
Yeah, I would just like to, at the end of this, and as you can probably tell from other things I said, I'm not native to Rhode Island originally. I was born in a state called Texas, which is a little different geographically. But the challenge that I put to everyone in this group, because I've been in so many of them and saw so much happen during the pandemic, is that something can occur in this state that I could never dream of in Texas. And that is statewide engagement and partnership and initiatives for both for accessibility and inclusion, but also as Charles just described, for different voices being elevated and shown to the schools and people throughout the state. which I think could be a model, instead of thinking of it as a state that's too small to do something, that this is the state that can do things first, because it would take years less time to coordinate a statewide initiative here than it would to do something over the entire state of Texas, just by sheer distance. And it's something that I've really embraced and loved about being here. So I just wanted to throw that out. Thank
On
you.
that note, I think you just put our final words
Yeah.
in play. I think one thing I would love to do that we didn't plan for, so Julie, I'm sorry, but I think it would be really cool if we could, everyone that's on this call, because there's so many of us that stay till the end, and we're just so thrilled to have you. If everyone could just turn on their cameras, and let's just all wave to each other and say hello, because go to that gallery mode and
Wow, fabulous.
So great, so great.
It's just fabulous to see everyone.
all right. Well, I will close this out and just say thank you all for being here today. Again, we just are incredibly thrilled and privileged to have all of you amazing artists, arts organizations, humanists, thinkers, doers, working with us in Rhode Island, and the Rhode Island Council and the Humanities and the State Arts Council are here to serve you. We're here to amplify any of the work that you do. We want to be here to make sure what you're doing gets out to the rest of the world, and that we continue to stay connected, and that we continue to learn and grow and nurture the state's cultural life, and in doing so, make Rhode Island the most amazing state in the country. So thank you all, and we look forward to spending more time with you in the future.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and thank you to all the amazing panelists. You
Yes.
were fabulous. So fabulous. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really awesome. Have a great weekend.
You too.